Her name was Dorothy. In 1958, she was raising 3 children in a 2-bedroom house in Akron, Ohio. She had no parenting books on her shelf, no sleep training program, no developmental milestone tracker, no screen time limit, because there was no screen to limit. Her youngest child, James, was 7 years old and terrified of the dark. Dorothy did not take him to a specialist. She did not buy a weighted blanket. She did not download an app designed to help children regulate their nervous systems. She sat on the edge of his bed. She told him the same story she had told him every night for 6 months. By the 3rd month, he was no longer afraid. He simply needed the story to end before the lights went out. That was it. Dorothy's 3 children grew up. Not one of them required professional intervention for anxiety before the age of 30. Not one of them described their childhood as something they needed to recover from. Her daughter, who raised her own children in the 1980s, noticed something strange. The parenting advice she was being given was the opposite of everything Dorothy had done. Be more responsive, be more present, never let them feel uncomfortable, never let them wait. Her children were more anxious than Dorothy's had ever been. She could not explain it. Dorothy could have. Dorothy had no white noise machine playing ocean sounds in the nursery, no baby monitor with a camera and a heartbeat sensor, no parenting podcast in her earbuds during breakfast, no certified gentle parenting coach at $90 an hour, no guilt about what she had not given her children. What Dorothy had were 10 parenting habits so ordinary she never thought to name them. Nobody on her street named them either, because every mother did it that way. 10 habits. None of them require a certification. None of them have a waiting list. None of them come with a refund policy. This video is about what those habits were and who decided they needed to be replaced. Then something changed. Not the children, not the human child, and what it has always needed. What changed is exactly what this video is about. Before number 10, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to make. Number 10, Dorothy's children were bored, regularly, on purpose. Every Saturday morning in 1958, the 3 children woke up with nothing planned. No class, no scheduled activity, no organized sport, no parent standing by with a suggestion. Dorothy was in the kitchen. The children were on their own. What they did with that time was entirely up to them. They built things from scraps. They invented games that had no names. They argued, resolved it themselves, and kept playing. By noon, they had created something Dorothy had never seen before. She did not know that developmental psychologists at Harvard Medical School would spend decades proving that unstructured time is the primary environment in which children develop executive function, problem-solving capacity, and emotional self-regulation. She just knew that a busy mother could not entertain 3 children all day. The children's activity and enrichment market, classes, camps, and apps designed to fill every hour of a child's day, is now worth over $60 billion annually. Dorothy's children had Saturday morning and a backyard. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 9. Dorothy's children did chores. Real ones, with real consequences if undone. At 7, James made his own bed every morning. At 9, his sister Carol washed the breakfast dishes. At 11, their oldest, Robert, took out the coal ash and swept the porch. None of this was optional. None of it came with a reward chart. None of it was called building responsibility. It was simply what children in a house did. They were part of the household. The household needed things done. They did them. A 2019 study from the University of Minnesota found that the single strongest predictor of success in young adulthood was not grades or socioeconomic background. It was whether children had done regular household chores before the age of 4. Dorothy started her children on chores at 3. She knew that a 7-year-old who could not make his bed was being done a disservice. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 1 on this list is the parenting habit the child psychology industry has spent the most money replacing. A habit so simple it has no clinical name. Stay with me. Number 8. Dorothy said no, and she meant it, once. She did not explain it at length, she did not negotiate. She did not offer an alternative to soften the refusal. She said no. It meant no. The child knew it meant no because it had always meant no. Not maybe, not let me think about it, not I understand your feelings about this, but no. Research published in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry found that inconsistent parental limit setting is one of the primary contributors to childhood anxiety disorders. The brain of a child who cannot predict outcomes is a brain in a state of low-grade chronic stress. Dorothy's children could predict outcomes perfectly. The predictability was its own form of safety. The parenting book industry generates over $4 billion annually. Dorothy did not read parenting books. She said no and meant it. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 7. Dorothy's children spent most of their time outside, not in organized outdoor activities. Just outside. After school, the door opened and the children went out. They came back when they heard her call from the porch. In that time, they ran, fell, climbed, scraped their knees, got up, kept going. They encountered physical risk without a parent nearby to prevent it. They encountered conflict with other children without a parent nearby to resolve it. They came home tired in a way that no indoor activity has ever produced. Research published by the American Academy of Pediatrics found that unstructured outdoor play reduces cortisol levels, builds resilience, and decreases symptoms of anxiety and attention deficit disorders in children. Dorothy knew only that a child who had been outside all afternoon was a child who ate dinner and went to bed without complaint. The outdoor enrichment industry, nature camps, forest schools, outdoor therapy, is now worth over $12 billion. Dorothy's children had a street and a directive to be home before dark. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 6. Dorothy did not apologize to her children. This requires explanation. She was not cruel. She was not cold. She loved her children with the quiet certainty of someone who had never questioned whether she did. But she did not apologize for decisions she made as their mother. She did not say sorry for the bedtime she held to. She did not say sorry for the food she served. She did not say sorry for the no she had meant. An apology from a parent for a parenting decision sends one signal: I am not certain I had the right to do that. A child who receives that signal begins to question whether the parent's authority is real. Dorothy was certain, not because she was never wrong, but because a mother who apologizes for every difficult decision raises children who cannot tolerate difficulty. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. We are almost at number 1. It is the parenting habit that an entire generation was taught to abandon. Almost there. Number 5. Dorothy did not place her children at the center of the family. In Dorothy's house in 1958, the family had a center. It was the marriage. Dorothy and her husband were the axis around which the household turned. The children revolved around them, not the other way. This meant that when Dorothy and her husband disagreed, the children witnessed 2 adults resolve a conflict. It meant that when Dorothy needed quiet, she got it, and the children learned that other people's needs were real. It meant that when the family made a decision, the children were informed of it rather than consulted about it. They were children. They were loved completely. They were not the most important people in the room. Research from the University of California, Davis found that children raised as the undisputed center of their family show higher rates of narcissism, lower frustration tolerance, and greater difficulty forming peer relationships in adolescence. Dorothy simply knew that a house that revolved around children was a house with no adults in it. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 4. Dorothy's children were allowed to fail. James failed his mathematics test in October 1959. Dorothy looked at the test. She said, "Then you will study harder next week." She did not call the teacher. She did not question the grading. She did not tell James the test was unfair or that he was smart enough and had simply had a bad day. She told him the result was the result, and next week was another chance. James studied harder. He passed the following test. He remembered both. He remembered the failure more. Research from Florida State University found that college students with highly interventionist parents showed significantly lower resilience and higher rates of anxiety than students whose parents allowed them to experience failure. Dorothy allowed failure, not because she did not care, because a child who has never failed has never learned how to continue. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 3. Dorothy gave her children work that was slightly beyond them. This is the one that sounds unkind. It was the opposite. When Robert was 9, Dorothy asked him to carry a load that was almost too heavy. Not so heavy it would hurt him. Heavy enough that he would have to figure out how. He dropped it twice. He found a way on the third try. Dorothy did not help him on the first 2 drops. She watched. She let him solve it. Developmental psychologists call this the zone of proximal development, where all real learning happens. The self-esteem movement launched in the 1980s and told parents that praise was the primary tool of healthy development. Research published in Psychological Science in 2017 found that children praised for being smart show lower persistence after failure and higher anxiety than children praised for effort. Dorothy never told her children they were smart. She told them to try harder. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 2. Dorothy was not her children's friend. She was their mother. The distinction mattered enormously. Her children could not tell her to stop being unfair. They could not negotiate their way out of a consequence. They could not leverage her desire to be liked into a softer version of the rule. Dorothy did not need her children to approve of her decisions. She did not need them to be happy with her. She needed them to be safe, healthy, honest, and capable. Those 4 things were her job. Being liked was not. Friendship-based parenting has been linked by researchers at the University of Virginia to higher rates of adolescent depression, lower academic performance, and greater difficulty with authority figures in adulthood. Dorothy was not a peer. She was an authority. Her children knew exactly what she was. They also knew exactly how much she loved them. The 2 things were not in conflict. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Number 1. Dorothy trusted her children to become. This is the one the parenting industry cannot package. Dorothy did not have a developmental outcome she was engineering toward. She was not building a college application. She was not optimizing for a particular kind of adult. She was raising people. People who would eventually be competent. People who would eventually be kind. People who would eventually leave and build something of their own. Her job was to give them the conditions for that, not to control the result. The global pediatric mental health market was valued at $404 billion in 2024. That number represents, in part, the cost of childhoods so carefully managed that the children inside them never developed the capacity to manage themselves. Dorothy managed the household. The children managed themselves, because she trusted that they would. Dorothy never had the product. Dorothy never had the problem either. Dorothy passed away in 2002. She was 83 years old. Her 3 children were at her bedside. All 3 were employed. All 3 were married. All 3 knew how to make a bed, wash a dish, carry a heavy load, and accept a no. None of them had needed saving, because Dorothy had spent 20 years building people who could handle a life that was not easy. The 10 habits Dorothy kept were not a parenting philosophy. They were not a method. They were not certified or peer-reviewed or taught in a weekend workshop. They were just what a woman in Akron, Ohio did with 3 children and a factory worker's wage in 1958. What changed between Dorothy's kitchen and yours was not what children need. Those needs have not changed since 1958. What changed was who got paid when those needs were replaced with something they could diagnose, treat, and bill by the hour. Pick one thing from this list. Come back in the comments in a week and tell me what it did. The next video is already waiting.